take you back to the moment it all shifted. Thank you for being here with me tonight. And if you enjoy these calm, real-time stories, feel free to like, share, and subscribe before we begin. Because on Christmas Eve, the house was warm, but the air felt strangely thin, lights blinking softly along the mantel, while a low hum of carols circled the room like a memory trying to stay alive. And as I carried a steaming casserole from the kitchen, the heat brushed my face before fading into the cold draft creeping from the hallway. A quiet reminder that peace isn't always real. My son stood near the tree, with his hands buried in his pockets, shoulders raised, tapping the carpet in that impatient way teenagers do when they believe they've outgrown everyone around them. And when I told him dinner was ready, he didn't answer, didn't move, didn't even look at me until he finally lifted his eyes with a breath full of annoyance and whispered two words that cut through the lights, the warmth, and everything Christmas is supposed to protect. You're embarrassing. So soft, yet so sharp, that even the music behind him seemed to pause. And as the casserole felt heavier in my hands, I realized Christmas Eve had just changed its meaning. Because he didn't know what those words set in motion. Not yet. The words hung in the air longer than they should have, settling over the living room like a thin frost. And while he shifted his weight, as if waiting for me to snap back, I only breathed in slowly, letting the cinnamon scent from the candles steady me as the tree lights flickered against the window and cast small, trembling reflections across the floor. I placed the casserole on the table without a sound, feeling the heat leave my palms as if the warmth was choosing sides. And when I turned back to him, he pretended to examine an ornament, one he made in 3rd grade with shaky handwriting and too much glitter. Yet he wouldn't touch it, maybe afraid it might remind him of who he used to be with me. So instead he mumbled, "Can we just not make tonight weird?" And I watched his jaw tighten, watched the distance he built like a small wall he thought I couldn't see. And while every part of me wanted to ask what changed, who he was trying to impress, who taught him embarrassment comes dressed as motherhood, I kept my voice level, almost quiet, saying only, "Dinner's ready whenever you are." Because control isn't always loud. And as he walked past me without a glance, brushing the air beside my arm, something inside me settled, not anger, not hurt, just a steady realization that tonight wasn't about what he said, but about what I needed to show him. He pushed back from the table, halfway through the meal, chair legs scraping against the hardwood in a sharp line that broke the soft hum of the Christmas lights. And without looking at me, he muttered, "I'll be back late. Don't wait up," as though I were a roommate instead of the woman who'd wrapped every gift under the tree. But I didn't move, didn't plead, didn't remind him that Christmas Eve used to be our night. The movies, the cocoa, the dumb jokes he made just to see if he could make me laugh. And instead, I watched him grab his jacket, with a rush of cold air following him, bringing in the smell of winter and streetlights. And when the door clicked shut, the quiet didn't collapse. It shifted, settling deeper around me, like a blanket made of truth rather than warmth. And I exhaled slowly, staring at the untouched food on his plate, the half-folded napkin he left askew, all the signs he was halfway out of this house long before he physically walked out the door. Yet even as the ache rose in my chest, it wasn't sharp, it was steady, grounding, the kind of pain that shapes decisions. And as I stood and began clearing the table alone, every motion deliberate, every sound controlled, I felt the idea forming not out of anger, but clarity. If he wanted to see what life without me looked like, then maybe I would let him, not to punish him, but to remind him of something he'd forgotten. What it means to have someone who shows up even when you think you no longer need them. I wiped the counters in slow, steady motions, the citrus cleaner rising into the warm air while the house settled into a deeper quiet. And as the clock ticked past 9, then 10, then closer to 11, I kept moving through the rooms, not pacing, not waiting, just observing, touching the edges of picture frames, adjusting the slight tilt of the wreath on the door, noticing how the Christmas lights hummed softly like they were filling space he used to fill with chatter. And with every small task, the thought that had sparked earlier grew more defined. I walked into his room, not to snoop, but to simply see. And the moment I stepped inside, the shift became undeniable. Worn hoodie on the floor, unwashed cup on the desk, sheets twisted from mornings, he rushed out without a goodbye. Everything carrying the scent and shape of a boy trying too hard to be older than he was. And I sat on the edge of his bed, feeling the cold air brush against the window pane, while my reflection stared back at me calm, still, resolved. Because this wasn't about rebellion or retaliation, and it wasn't about making him feel small. It was about making space for him to understand the value of what he still had. And as a distant car passed outside, headlights sweeping across his posters, I whispered to the empty room, maybe it's time you see the difference between having a mother and losing one. The words soft, almost carried away by the quiet. And when I stood again, something inside me clicked into place, gentle but final, like the last ornament being hung on the tree. The house felt different as I moved back down the hallway later, almost hollow, like the walls themselves were holding their breath. And when I reached the living room, the soft glow of the Christmas tree flickered against the window, reflecting a version of me I hadn't seen in years. Composed, unshaken, quietly certain, I sat on the arm of the couch, listening to the muted hum of the refrigerator and the faint whistle of wind slipping through the eaves, every sound sharpening the truth that had been building since he said those careless words. And as I folded my arms, the memory replayed again, his eyes avoiding mine, his voice too quick, too sharp, saying, "You're embarrassing." And the sting didn't come from the words themselves, but from how confidently he believed them, like he had outgrown gratitude overnight. A shadow passed across the tree lights when a car slowed outside, and I turned my head instinctively, but it kept going, leaving the room still again, so quiet that even my heartbeat felt loud. And in that quiet, I let the idea that had formed upstairs settle deeper. This wasn't punishment. It was perspective, and maybe the only thing that could cut through the fog of his teenage pride was letting him feel absence instead of hearing lectures he'd only tune out. I reached for the remote, turned off the TV though it hadn't been on, and whispered into the room, barely more than a breath, "You'll understand soon." The words not spiteful, not angry, just honest. And as I stood and felt a calm weight settle in my chest, I knew the next move would be decisive, silent, and unforgettable. I walked into the kitchen again, the tile cool under my feet, and pulled out the small notepad I kept beside the fridge, its pages thin, edges curled from years of grocery lists and reminders. And as the overhead light buzzed softly, I wrote just 2 lines, nothing dramatic, nothing emotional, just a quiet truth he would read later. "Dinner's in the fridge. I'll be out." The pen glided smoothly, my handwriting calm and even, and when I tore the page free, the rip sounded loud in the stillness. I set the note on the counter, aligning it perfectly with the edge of the fruit bowl, my fingers lingering for a breath before pulling away. The air felt heavier now, like the house understood what was coming. And as I slipped my coat from the hook, the faint scent of pine drifted in from the tree, mixing with the cold draft that crept beneath the back door. I didn't rush. I simply moved step by step, keys in hand, scarf wrapped loosely, lights turned down low, each action deliberate, each one settling into place like pieces of a plan that had been waiting for the right moment. I glanced toward the staircase, the banister glowing softly from the string lights wrapped around it, and a quiet thought passed through me. Sometimes presence speaks, and sometimes absence teaches. Tonight, absence would speak louder. When I opened the door, the crisp winter air met me instantly, sharp and clean, brushing across my face like a reset. And as I stepped outside and pulled the door closed behind me, the click echoed through the silent house, sealing everything I intended with a calm finality. He wouldn't understand until he walked into the empty quiet without me in it. The cold wrapped around me the moment I stepped onto the porch, a thin, biting wind slipping past my collar as the neighborhood sat in its usual holiday stillness, porch lights glowing softly, wreaths hanging neatly, distant laughter drifting from a house down the street. Yet everything felt muted, like the night was letting me move through it unnoticed. I walked slowly to my car, each step crunching against the frost-tipped ground. And when I opened the door, the interior smelled faintly of vanilla and old pine needles from last year's tree-hauling trip. Memories flickered, warm and quick, but they didn't stop my hands from moving with quiet certainty as I started the engine. The heater coughed to life, sending a low hum through the cabin, and the windshield fogged at the edges before clearing, revealing the street ahead dim, calm, waiting. I rested my hands on the steering wheel for a long moment, listening to the soft rumble beneath me, thinking about how he would come home, drop his shoes in the hallway, toss his bag on the floor, expecting everything exactly where he left it, including me. That expectation had become invisible to him, taken for granted, absorbed into routine, and tonight was the first time I'd ever stepped outside it. Snowflakes began drifting down, small and slow, tapping lightly against the glass, and with each one, the decision settled deeper, simple, steady, necessary. I pulled out of the driveway, watching the house shrink in the rearview mirror, the tree lights glowing through the front window like a quiet heartbeat left behind. And as I turned the corner, a strange calm washed over me. Not cold, not bitter, just clear. He wanted space from what embarrassed him. Tonight, for the first time, I was giving him exactly that. I drove without music, letting the quiet settle around me as the snow picked up, soft flakes sweeping across the windshield in slow, drifting patterns that felt almost hypnotic. The town looked different under the Christmas lights, storefronts dimmed, streets nearly empty, just a few cars moving with the same tired calm of people finishing late holiday errands. But the stillness inside the car was louder than anything outside, a steady reminder of the words he'd thrown so casually, the way he dismissed me, as if mothers don't feel the sting of being reduced to an inconvenience. I turned down the road near the park, where the tall pines stood heavy with snow, branches sagging under the weight, and parked beneath one of the old lamps that flickered at the base. The light above me hummed gently, casting a pale circle on the hood of my car as I leaned back, hands resting in my lap, the heater warming the air in slow waves. For a moment, I just breathed deep, controlled, watching my reflection faintly in the window glass. Eyes steady, jaw relaxed, not shaken, but resolute. Sometimes the harsh truth is that love can make someone blind to effort, to presence, to sacrifice. And the only way to correct the blindness is to disrupt their view. I wasn't disappearing forever. I wasn't abandoning him. I was allowing the silence to speak where my words couldn't. A couple walked past the park entrance, bundled in thick coats, holding hands, laughter visible in little white clouds. And it hit me then, how many Christmases I'd held everything together without asking for acknowledgement. Tonight was simply the first time I stepped back. I rested my palm against the steering wheel, feeling the leather warm beneath my skin, and whispered to myself, let him feel the space. The snow kept falling. The night held steady, and I stayed exactly where I needed to be. I stayed parked beneath that old flickering lamp until the clock on the dashboard crept past 11:30. The glow of the numbers casting a soft blue tint across the quiet interior as snow continued piling gently along the edges of the windshield. The world outside had gone completely still. No more passing cars, no more distant laughter, just winter settling itself deeper into the night. I imagined him coming home, opening the door, calling out casually, expecting my voice to answer from the kitchen or living room, and then the silence meeting him instead. A silence he wasn't used to. A silence that would echo more loudly than any lecture I'd ever given. I pictured him looking around, confused at first, maybe annoyed, maybe shrugging it off, until he saw the note. 2 simple lines. No explanations, no apologies, just absence. The heater clicked softly, sending a low wave of warmth across my legs, and I watched as the snowflakes blurred the streetlights outside, turning everything into a gentle, shifting haze. My phone buzzed once in the cup holder, the vibration quiet but sharp in the stillness. I glanced at the screen, his name, a single text preview. Mom, where are you? The words were small, unpolished, not demanding, not angry, just unsure. I didn't open it. I let the notification fade. Instead, I rested my head back against the seat, feeling the soft hum of the engine beneath me, steady and grounding. This wasn't about punishing him. This was about letting the empty spaces outline what he never noticed when I was always there. The snow thickened on the road, and I exhaled slowly, my breath warming the air in front of me as I whispered, let him sit with the quiet. And for the first time all night, the quiet felt like power. Another 15 minutes passed before my phone buzzed again, the small vibration cutting through the hush of the car. And when I looked down this time, it wasn't a text, but a call. His name glowing softly on the screen, blinking against the dim interior. I watched it ring without moving, the steady rhythm of the vibration matching the low hum of the heater. And when it stopped, the silence that followed felt heavier, like the night itself was waiting for my decision. Snow clung to the side windows now, a thin white film that blurred the world beyond. And when I glanced into the rearview mirror, my own reflection looked composed, almost detached, not cold, just firm. A moment later, another text appeared. Mom, please pick up. No punctuation, no attitude, but still not understanding. Not yet. I placed the phone face down and looked out toward the park, where the trees stood still under the thickening snow, their branches bending slightly, like they too were holding something unspoken. I thought about every night I'd waited up for him, every late dinner reheated, every quiet worry swallowed so he could feel supported instead of smothered, and how easily he'd thrown the word embarrassing at me, not realizing it cut closer because of everything I'd protected him from. A car drove by slowly, tires whispering across the snow, its headlights sweeping briefly across my dashboard before disappearing down the road, leaving the darkness to settle again. I breathed in deep and steady, feeling the warm air fill my lungs before releasing it in a soft fog that vanished almost instantly. I wasn't punishing him. I wasn't hiding. I was letting him hear the sound of his own words echoing back to him in a quiet house, something they'd never been forced to do before. The phone buzzed once more. This time the message was shorter. Just one word, Mom. And in that small, uncertain word, the shift began. The next buzz didn't come from my phone at all. It came from the quiet tremor of the car as my son tried calling again, his name lighting up the screen with a persistence that felt different this time, less impatient, more unsettled. And I watched it without touching it, letting the ringtone spill into the warm air before fading into the soft hum of the heater. A moment later, a voicemail notification appeared, and though I didn't open it, I imagined the tone confused, maybe a little frustrated, but layered with something new. Uncertainty. Snow tapped lightly against the roof, each flake a tiny reminder of how quickly a warm home can turn cold when the person who keeps it warm steps away. And I looked out at the empty park, the lampposts glowing dimly through the drifting white. Everything softened and muted. I thought about how he'd walk from room to room the moment he realized I truly wasn't coming back right away, checking the kitchen, the bedrooms, maybe even opening the back door, as if I might be standing outside waiting to be invited back in. That image didn't hurt me. It clarified everything. He'd never had to imagine a world where I wasn't immediately accessible, never had to wonder where I was, never had to sit in silence without my presence filling the edges. The phone buzzed again, this time a message that popped up in 3 pieces. Mom, pause. Can you come home? Pause, please. The last word hit different, small, raw, honest. I turned my face toward the window, watching the warmth from the heater fog a small patch of glass before clearing again. And in that shifting haze, I realized he was finally feeling the one thing I needed him to understand. The absence of a mother doesn't feel like freedom, it feels like loss. And I let that truth settle as I whispered into the dim car, not yet. I stayed parked beneath that dim street lamp until the cold finally pushed me to move. And as I pulled out of the lot, the world outside felt quieter, like even the snow was holding its breath, while my phone buzzed again with a new message. This one longer, rushed, almost panicked, the preview showing just enough for my stomach to tighten. I didn't mean it. Can you just tell me where you are? I didn't open it. Not yet. Instead, I drove slowly through the drifting flakes, the headlights carving soft tunnels of light through the night, every familiar street looking strangely distant, as if I were seeing my own town for the first time from the outside. The heater hummed steadily, warming my fingers as I gripped the wheel, and I felt an unexpected calm spread through me, an awareness that for once, I wasn't responding, fixing, smoothing, cushioning the blow of someone else's carelessness. I was choosing myself, and that shift felt powerful enough to shake the air around me. Passing the small bakery where I used to take him for hot chocolate when he was 10, I wondered if he remembered those mornings, how he'd cling to my arm, sleepy and happy, before the teenage years taught him to roll his eyes at the woman who gave him everything. The contrast stung, but didn't undo me. If anything, it fueled the quiet resolve building in my chest. Another buzz, this time a voicemail, then another, stacking one after the other like he suddenly realized silence has edges sharp enough to cut. I drove on, deeper into town, then past it, until the houses thinned and the fields opened wide, dark and untouched beneath the snow. And somewhere between the last cluster of streetlights and the long stretch of country road, I felt the shift I'd been waiting for, not in him, but in me. Tonight wasn't about punishing my son. It was about teaching him the weight of words he tossed so carelessly, and he was finally starting to feel it. I finally pulled into the quiet rest stop just beyond the county line, the kind of place truckers used to nap between long hauls, and parked beneath a lone flickering lamp as another voicemail rolled in. His voice tight, hurried, almost disbelieving, as if he couldn't fathom that I, the woman who always came running, wasn't rushing back this time. I listened only to the first few seconds. "Mom, please, can you just answer? I didn't mean it like that, I swear." Then I closed it, letting the silence settle again, heavy but strangely comforting. Snow drifted in slow spirals outside the windshield, and I leaned back, watching the flakes blur into soft streaks as I exhaled for what felt like the first real breath of the night. Memories came in quiet waves. Christmas Eve years ago, when he'd wrapped his small arms around my waist to thank me for staying up late assembling his new bike. The way he used to look at me like I was his whole world before the years chipped away at that tenderness, replaced with sighs and impatience, and the belief that mothers are fixtures, not humans with limits. My phone buzzed again, then again, texts now shorter, frantic. "Where did you go? I'm sorry. Just tell me you're safe." His worry didn't hurt me, it clarified everything, because lessons don't land when you lecture. They land when life pauses long enough for someone to see the empty space you once filled without complaint. I switched off the car, letting the cold creep in just enough to wake me fully, and stared at my reflection, faintly mirrored in the dark glass. I wasn't disappearing forever. I wasn't abandoning him. I was giving him the one thing he had never given me, a moment to understand the impact of his own actions. And as the wind rattled the branches above the roof of the rest stop, I knew the night wasn't over yet, because the part he needed to feel most was still coming. I stayed at that rest stop until the sky began bleeding into a pale, icy blue, the kind of winter dawn that makes every sound sharper, every thought louder. And as I drove back toward town, the roads still empty and dusted with fresh snow, I could feel a shift inside me, steady, deliberate, like stepping into a version of myself I'd forgotten existed. By the time I reached my neighborhood, his messages had slowed into long, anxious pauses, the kind that only come when fear starts to outweigh pride. Lights were still glowing in the houses lining our street, cheerful and warm for Christmas morning, but our home stood dim, except for the faint glow of the living room lamp he must have left on while pacing. I parked across the street, letting the engine hum one last time before shutting it off, giving myself a moment to observe him through the front window. Shoulders slumped, phone in hand, walking tight circles like he was afraid to sit still. For the first time in years, he looked small again, not physically, but emotionally, stripped of the casual arrogance he'd worn like armor. And as I stepped out of the car, snow crunching under my boots in that crisp, definitive way, I felt no rush, no trembling, no eagerness to soothe him. This time, I walked with intention, letting the cold sting my cheeks as I approached the door he hadn't bothered to lock. When I opened it, he spun around instantly, eyes red, mouth parting, as though he didn't know where to begin. The silence stretched between us, quiet, waiting, and I stood in it, unbroken, ready for him to finally face the consequence of a single careless sentence spoken on a night meant for love. He opened his mouth like he was about to defend himself, but the words caught on something: guilt, fear, maybe both. And instead, he just exhaled, a shaky breath that fogged in the cold air, trailing in behind me as I closed the door. The house felt different now, stripped of its holiday warmth. The scent of pine dulled, the lights dimmed, the silence too honest to ignore. He shifted his weight, rubbing his palms together like he needed permission to speak. And for once, I didn't rush to fill the space or soften the moment. I simply stood there, coat still on, hands still cold, watching him struggle to gather pieces of a confidence he no longer had. "Mom, I didn't mean it like that," he finally whispered, voice small, eyes flicking away like he couldn't bear to see his own damage reflected in mine. A beat of quiet passed, then another. And when I didn't respond, his shoulders sagged deeper, his breath catching like he feared I might walk out again. I thought being with my friends mattered more. I thought you'd always just be here." The confession tumbled out soft, unpolished, full of a boy who'd forgotten the edges of the woman who raised him. I took one step forward, slow enough that he felt the weight of it, and the floor creaked between us like it, too, was holding its breath. "You said you were tired of seeing me," I said quietly, not sharp, not accusing, just the bare, cold truth placed gently between us like a mirror. He flinched, eyes glistening, and for the first time, he realized the kind of night he had created, one he wouldn't forget. Not because I punished him, but because I stopped cushioning the blow of his choices. He stepped closer, just one hesitant shuffle, like he wasn't sure if he was allowed to bridge the distance anymore, and his voice lowered to a thin, trembling thread. I was showing off. They were laughing. I didn't want to look weak. The admission hung between us, and the house seemed to respond with a quiet shift, the faint hum of the heater kicking on, the soft crackle from the fireplace embers, the glow of the Christmas lights trembling against the window, as if the storm outside leaned in to listen. I didn't move. I let the moment breathe, let him feel the space where my usual warmth used to be. "So you made me the weak one instead," I said softly, not to wound him, but to make him understand the shape of the hurt he created. His chin trembled, eyes dropping to the floor like the truth was suddenly too heavy to hold. "I'm sorry, Mom, I really am," he whispered, and it wasn't dramatic, just raw, quiet, scared. A boy realizing the woman who had always forgiven him without pause might not be so quick this time. I watched him search my face for a sign, a slip, anything that told him things were still safe, still familiar. But I'd changed tonight. The air knew it, the floor knew it, even he felt it. I wasn't angry. I wasn't loud. I was simply done cushioning his choices. His hands finally unclenched, falling to his sides in surrender as he took a breath that shook him straight through. "Tell me what to do," he said, voice cracking in the faint glow of the tree. And for the first time all night, the power settled quietly back into my hands. Still, calm, certain, the room held its breath as I stepped past him, not to walk away, but to shift the air between us, letting him feel the steady calm he once mistook for softness. The tree lights flickered across the hardwood in broken patterns, and his shadow followed mine, smaller, hesitant, stripped of the confidence he had worn earlier like a cheap mask. "What you do next isn't for me," I said quietly, stopping where the faint smell of pine met the lingering cold drifting in from the window. "It's for the version of yourself you keep pretending to be when your friends are watching." He swallowed hard, the sound sharp in the still house, and I caught the way his shoulders lifted, then fell, as if the truth pressed on them from above. "I don't want to be that person," he said, voice barely holding. "Then stop choosing him," I replied, my tone steady, not accusing, just real. He stepped closer, slow, like he was approaching a fragile space he finally understood needed care. "Mom, please, just tell me how to fix it." His words softened the storm outside. The wind eased, the house settled, even the lights hummed differently. I turned slightly, enough for him to see the shift in my expression, controlled, firm, but not cold. "You can't fix tonight," I said, "but you can learn from it." The silence that followed wasn't heavy, it was reflective. A pause that let everything sink into him. He nodded with a quiet seriousness I hadn't seen on him in years, as if the weight of the night had carved him into someone new. And as he stood there, waiting for whatever came next, I felt the next move settle into place. Not revenge, not punishment, just the calm decision of a mother reclaiming the balance that had slipped too far. I walked toward the kitchen, letting the soft thud of my steps guide him, each one deliberate, each one reminding him that my silence had edges now. The warm light from above spilled across the counter, catching the untouched cocoa I'd made hours earlier back when the evening still held promise. I rested my hand on the mug, feeling the faint trace of heat left at the bottom. A quiet echo of patience I'd allowed to burn too long. He lingered at the doorway, not crossing the threshold, as if he finally respected a boundary he never noticed before. "I canceled our plans for tonight," I said calmly, not looking at him yet. "Every tradition we built, all paused." The words weren't loud, but they struck him harder than any raised voice could. I heard his breath hitch, the way regret pushed through him, thick and unsteady. "Mom, no, please. Don't let this ruin Christmas." I turned then, slowly, letting the overhead glow catch the shift in my eyes, controlled, steady. "Christmas isn't ruined," I said. "It's just real now." His face fell, and he leaned against the doorframe like it was the only thing keeping him upright. "I messed everything up," he murmured, more to himself than to me. I set the mug down, the soft click against the counter sounding final. "Actions don't disappear because you didn't mean them," I said gently, "but they can change you if you let them." The house went quiet again, the kind of quiet that makes people choose who they're going to become. I watched him take that in, watched something settle behind his eyes. Fear, yes, but also understanding. And that's when I knew the night wasn't over. Not yet. Something important still had to unfold before Christmas morning arrived. He stood there, barely breathing, as if the weight of the night finally pressed all the noise out of him, leaving only truth behind. I walked past him toward the living room, the soft glow of the tree spreading a tired warmth across the carpet, wrapping the room in a tenderness he hadn't earned, but suddenly needed. He followed slowly, each step hesitant, like he feared breaking what little was left between us. I stopped by the tree and touched one of the ornaments he'd made in kindergarten, the one with his tiny painted handprint. The colors faded now, but still holding the shape of who he used to be. "Do you know why tonight mattered?" I asked quietly. He swallowed. "Because I hurt you." I nodded once. "You did, but it's more than that." I turned toward him, meeting his eyes without letting mine tremble. "Someday you'll leave this house. Someday these rooms will just be memories. And I needed you to understand that respect and kindness aren't seasonal gifts. They're the foundation of everything." His face crumpled, not from fear, but from recognition, the kind that sinks deep and stays. "I don't want to lose you," he whispered. "Then don't choose the kind of behavior that pushes people away," I answered softly. The clock ticked behind us, steady, patient, reminding us that midnight was close. He stepped forward then and wrapped his arms around me in a quiet, trembling hug that carried every apology he couldn't form with words. I held him back, steady but not indulgent, letting the moment settle the way snow settles on quiet streets, soft, but marking everything it touches. When he finally pulled away, the tears in his eyes weren't dramatic, they were real. "Can we fix Christmas?" he asked, barely audible. "We already started," I said with a small, calm smile. Then I looked toward the viewers, letting my voice soften. "If you've been with me through this night, thank you. If you felt something here, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. It truly means more than you know." I offered a warm, final nod. Merry Christmas, and goodbye for now.